Hi, I'm Derek Ashang. Welcome to the stream. We have a very interesting show for you today. We were victims of an earthquake, but fortunately, everyone is okay. Our Skype wall, however, is the only casualty that we know of, so you'll notice that it's not operating today. However, we're discussing the fight for Tripoli. It continues. What happens after Gaddafi falls? We'll look at how young people see their country's political future coming together. Our digital producer, Ahmed Shahab Al-Din, is here looking out for your live feedback. Tweet us, as always, using the hashtag AJStream. Today, we've got two guests joining us on the couch. It's a very special opportunity. First, Nejla Abdurrahman is a Libyan-American writer and activist. And we also have Jason Pack, who's a researcher on Libya at Oxford's St. Anthony College. Welcome, both of you, to the stream. I understand that the internet has just been turned back on in Libya. What do you think is the significance of this?
It's actually quite significant. I was in Tunisia last month near the Libyan border visiting family, and some were in Tunisia, in Jerba in the south, and some were still in Tripoli, and people were actually going back and forth between the two places. And there were Libyans basically smuggling communications equipment across the border into the western mountain regions. They would make trips every couple of days to try to set up connection from the western mountain regions. And my cousins that I spoke to who came outside of Libya to Tunisia said one of the reasons they left was they were going crazy without any internet.
Without any internet access.
So it's a huge deal. It's been off in Tripoli for months.
Wow. So, Jason, is this a significant occurrence?
Of course. I mean, you could say that the internet has been one of the key tools of resistance in first Tunisia, then Egypt, and Syria and Libya. The regime took it away from the people, so to speak, to prevent their organizational efforts, and for the TNC to expand its organizational networks, which are quite dense already in the east, into the west. It needs the tool of the internet to be able to network people and get, you know, electricity and the economy back and flowing. So the faster this happens, the better.
Well, it's so interesting because people, I saw a tweet yesterday that was saying people who have been claiming that these revolutions are Facebook and Twitter revolutions, Libya is a perfect example that there's a lot more going on than social media. But it's great to have both of you here. We're going to have a really good conversation. We're glad you can participate in it. Remember, we always want to know what you are thinking as well, because ultimately this is your show. You can always tweet us using the hashtag AJStream, but now you can literally join us on Google+, where we've got a number of our other folks with us as we speak. We're going to hear more from our community members in just a bit, but first, here's some of what you're already sharing with us.
Now, since the stream's coverage of the situation in Bahrain, many of you have been sharing links and videos updating us on the ongoing unrest in the country. Now, dozens of these videos allegedly come from Shia villages where nightly demonstrations are occurring. So take a look at this video that was shot earlier this week that is coming out of Bilal al-Qadim, a suburb of Manama next to Zinj. Now that's just one example of several videos you've shared, but there's another story in Bahrain that's generating a lot of online discussion. Now this tweet from Bahraini citizen sums up the story in 140 characters. Doctors and other medical professionals, Bahraini citizen writes, have been summoned to appear before the military court on Sunday, August 28th. Now this news seems to signal a reversal by the Bahraini government because in June, the king decreed that those arrested during Bahrain's uprising would be referred to a civilian court rather than a military court. Now Rula al-Safar will be one of those facing a military court. This woman on the right, as you can see right here on the Bahraini Human Rights Center website, she is the head of the Bahrain Nursing Society in the red and was released on bail following a prison visit by the chair of Bahrain's Independent Commission of Inquiry. Now videos of Rula being essentially welcomed home by her family, I'm going to play you one, have surfaced online. This is just one of those videos. You can see her again wearing the red right there. She's accused of felonies, including the theft of medicine during the protests in February. She's scheduled to appear before the military court on August 28th, where more than a dozen of her colleagues will also be joining her. Now this tweet, another one from Khalil Bouhaza, compares pictures of Rula before she entered prison and after spending 5 months of detainment. So I'm going to scroll down. You can see this is her on the right before she went into prison, and then that same image of her looking quite frail and arguably different. Now, human rights organizations are criticizing what they're calling a reversal, quote unquote, by the Bahraini government when it comes to the trying of civilians. although loyalists argue that a royal decree in August clarified the government's position, saying that military trials would continue in felony cases. And on their website, Amnesty Online called Bahrain's military court a, quote, parody of justice and a stain on the Bahraini authorities' claim to uphold the law. Right here on Twitter, they're saying it's deeply disturbing that Bahraini activists face a military court and risk being imprisoned again. Now, of course, as always, we want to hear from you. So share your stories, whether it's tweets, videos, photos, using the hashtag AJStream, and we'll be sure to include them on the show.
Hi, my name is Sally Sharif. I'm a graduate student in media studies, and I'm in the stream.
After 41 years in power, Muammar Gaddafi's rule over Libya seems to be coming to an end. I want to show you some footage that we've gotten recently online that shows the initial uprisings in Benghazi. Now, inspired by uprisings in Tunisia and Egypt, the conflict in Libya actually broke out 6 months ago. This video shows the beginning of Libya's popular revolt in Benghazi, and a few weeks later, Gaddafi's forces lost control of that city. From there, the rebels, backed by NATO airstrikes, moved west across the country, taking key positions. On Sunday, the uprising reached Tripoli and crowds began celebrating. There has been some very interesting and compelling footage coming out of some of those celebrations, as you can see from my screen. But now that the government is on the verge of collapse, what does the country's future look like? Libya is a mix of tribes with varied interests and allegiances. This next image that we want to share with you gives you a little bit of a window into what we're talking about in that sense. This is a map of the country that is described. Each color is actually representing different tribal groups. Now, some worry that political instability could cause citizens to put these traditional ties ahead of national unity. Observers in the West fear that the longtime secular nation could also become a base for al-Qaeda-like groups. The NTC, or National Transitional Council, has been recognized by some 30 nations as the interim governing body. They've put together a draft constitutional charter for Libya's transitional phase, and in it, they outlined their vision of the future: a state with freedom of worship, a multi-party democracy, and equal rights for women. Joining us now from Benghazi is Taimur Aziz, a social media consultant to the Executive Office of the National Transitional Council. Welcome to the stream, Taimur. So good to have you here.
Welcome.
Now, because the internet has just come back on in Libya, we know that your connection is a little spotty. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to turn off your video. We're going to use a screenshot of you, and we're just going to take your audio. Can you do that for me?
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. And we're going to place up a screenshot in just a moment, but let's just jump right into this. First, Taimur, has Libya been, quote unquote, liberated? What is the status of things on the ground, as you would describe it?
All the Libyans feel the liberation inside themselves. So we feel free from many months, but Gaddafi's continue to force us he wants to rule us with all the possible way he has. So you can say that in Tripoli, from the east to Tripoli, it's mostly liberated. Even in the cities that are not liberated, like Sirte and Sabha, the people are waiting for the rebels to come so they can be liberated. Actually, they are. It's like a jail, big jail. These cities are a big jail for the residents.
Now, let me ask you a question. Thinking about the opportunities moving forward, unlike Egypt and Tunisia, Libya has virtually no civil society organizations. So how does the NTC plan to establish that kind of basic infrastructure for a democratic state?
Okay, and what's good in our revolution is that it's not came like a wave, or things came slowly. So we are now in the 6th month of the revolution. It's not like what's happened in Tunisia and in Egypt. In Tunisia, it's just 23 days, or in Egypt, I think 18 days. But here's 6 months. So 6 months means a long time to think and to plan and to do a lot of work on the ground, especially in the liberated cities like Benghazi and all the liberated cities in the east. So here in Benghazi now we have security, we have everything. We have start to establish some organizations, and that will help Tripoli, because Tripoli is now in the beginning of the road. So the people from NTC will get the advantage of the experience in Benghazi to take it to Tripoli.
Okay, now let's bring it actually to the couch. And Nesla, I want to begin with you. A lot of people are speculating that this NTC movement is really swept in from the east, but there are different ethnic and tribal groups in the west. You've been writing about ideas of national unity. How realistic is it that Libya will be able to hold together as a unified nation in these times?
Well, I mean, I've always taken the position that the tribal affiliations have been, or the importance of tribal affiliations in Libyan society have been exaggerated not only by the regime, but also by the Western press, the analysts. It's sort of become a cliche. That's not to say that tribes and perhaps tribal allegiances don't exist, but what does it mean to say tribes in 2011 in a very urban, relatively well-educated, modern state like Libya? We've already seen early on in the revolution tribes splitting along political lines, people belonging to the same tribe, some siding with the regime, with the Gaddafi regime, and others siding with the NTC. So I honestly am optimistic. I think that there will be problems in the future that the people will have to face, and that I'm confident they can handle it as long as there's effective, unselfish, good leadership on the part of the NTC. But I don't think that tribal bickering is one of them.
Jason, what's your take?
I'm going to come to a similar conclusion, but take a different approach. That Libya is not a predominantly urban society. It has urbanized in the last 40 years, but in contrast to, say, Syria, which in the Ottoman Empire was an urban society. Damascus in 1900 had 250,000 people. Tripoli had 12,000 people in 1900. We're talking about a society that has...
How many does it have today?
About 1.5 million. But...
it sounds pretty urban.
Yeah.
No, but the people come from rural backgrounds.
Gotcha.
The point is, it's not an urban society, and you have a whole generation that grew up under the sanctions that wasn't educated abroad, but then people who were older under the kingdom were. The relevance of it being a very tribal and unurban place in its origins are that you have disparate groupings. I mean, we talked about, Berber rebels in the Nafusa Mountains, or the military situation in Misrata. These groups are entirely different than the place where the revolution started in Benghazi, and they have different interests. And right now, it's not clear how they're going to share power in the NTC. However, now the key thing that we're going to side together is that there's no desire for separatism. Libya is going to stay one country, and the groups are going to work it out, but it doesn't mean they don't have different interests about the future of Libya.
Well, I've been hearing a lot of stuff online. People have been tweeting us in general about not only what's happening internally, but the role of the West. And I think Ahmed's got some more comments coming in.
Yeah, the role of the West is certainly a big question mark, when talking about Libya's future. Noha Agrab is tweeting in saying, if it wasn't for oil, the West would have never interfered. Libya should be, and I think she means independent, from Gaddafi and Western imperialism. And just quickly to show, we have this cartoon from Carlos Latouf that perhaps illustrates this issue. There you see NATO forces being depicted, the opposition fighters holding his hands, and in his teeth, in Arabic, right here, it says, petrol, which means, petrol or oil. And rather than putting the question to you, we'll let someone from our audience put the question to you, Taimur. Samura is asking, what can we do to guarantee that Libya won't be taken over by America and turned into another Afghanistan? Taimur, it seems
like we've lost his audio for now. We're going to try to get him back. Go ahead, Jason. Your thoughts?
I think if you're from the extreme radical left, you might like to say something like that, but the NATO intervention is not about oil at all. There are issues of migration affecting Europe, and destabilized Libya would present possibilities for international terrorism and things like this. The fact is that the Gaddafi regime was quite good at keeping the spigot flowing, and this uncertainty isn't benefiting world oil markets. So the idea that somehow Western intervention is going to be a situation of old school imperialism seems very unlikely.
I want to challenge that a little bit, because for one, I think this is an interesting point about the migration issues. However, it might be a bit naive to assume that oil interests do not play any part in the decisions of NATO getting involved. Nejla, what's your thoughts on these?
Well, I tend to agree with you, Derek. I don't think oil was necessarily the primary reason for getting involved. Like Jason was saying, the spigot was flowing, not necessarily at the peak levels, but it was flowing. But I think that the mistake that the regime made in the beginning days was that it shot too fast. And perhaps if it had waited longer and reacted less violently, we would have seen a different scenario. Because remember, some nations at the beginning were quick to disavow the regime, like France, like the UK. Others, like Russia and China, that also have interests in Libya, not just oil, but contracts, weapons contracts, construction contracts, obviously took the opposite side. So I think oil definitely comes into play in the decision to have the UN and then the NATO intervention in the States. But I don't think, I agree with Jason in the sense that I don't think it's in the sense of old school imperialism.
Also, the Libyan people themselves, and the NTC has been very clear about this, they want to respect old contracts. They want the foreign direct investment and the oil technicians getting in as soon as possible, because that's their patrimony. They want it to be developed, and there's enough wealth for everyone to benefit. So the Libyan people and global investment and oil markets. So the idea of imperialism, that I come and I take from you, is a kind of zero-sum view of things, almost like a Gaddafian economic philosophy. But we know today that developing the resource wealth of Libya will benefit Libyans, the region, Africa, and the world in general.
I think this is an interesting point. I do want to say, just to get it on the record, that we want to be careful to think that in this day and age colonialism no longer exists, because we see parts of the world where people will argue that there are colonial models still present.
And Derek, to be frank, you know, a lot of people are drawing comparisons, or at least questioning comparisons, between Iraq and Libya because of the Western intervention in Iraq. And one tweet just to that point, let's say right here, Blake Hounshell saying, the big problem looming for Libya is how to distribute the country's oil wealth fairly. Iraq still, after more than a decade, hasn't figured this out.
But so I want to bring this, I actually want to get Tamar, we're going to come back to you in just a sec, but I think Tamar, we have your audio back, and I want to give you a question that actually came to me via Twitter, saying, I think calling it a Libyan revolution is a misnomer. It's a Libyan proxy invasion. Tamar, how would you respond to that?
Excuse me, can you repeat the question?
I said that I think calling it a Libyan revolution is a misnomer. It's a Libyan proxy invasion. And what's being implied here on Twitter is that it is a proxy invasion or a colonial enterprise by NATO and Western powers. How would you respond?
No, this is wrong. Because we started the revolution, not the NATO, not the Western. We started the revolution on 17th of February. The people of Libya came out to the streets without going back. We know Colonel Gaddafi very well. We know that from the beginning of the revolution, if we go back to our home, he will kill all the Libyans. He will put all the Libyans in jail. So no way back. Even if NATO didn't come to Libya and help the civilians, we were continuing this without stopping. So I don't think.
And just one more question before actually we're going to get some of our people from Google Plus involved. Quickly, Tamar, so what do you expect the relationship or the role of Western powers will be in the ongoing development of Libya?
I think that people think that this is wrong if you think that the Western came to help the civilians because of the interests. Muammar Gaddafi gave the Western and gave the all the interests in Libya, the oil contracts, the infrastructure contracts, everything. So NATO, if the NATO wants to go for the counter interests in Libya, then they will fight with the Gaddafi, not with the civilians, because Gaddafi gives everything to the Western.
That's a very interesting point. Let's get some comments from our Google Plus audience.
Yeah, so we're going to go to Matthew Schroyer, who has a question on this topic. Matthew, go ahead.
Yes. It seems like a delicate balance between providing a humanitarian effort and also not going beyond your bounds to establish that imperialism. So what is the proper role for the global community to support Libyans but not go beyond their bounds?
Well, I think the proper role is to monitor. I mean, I should hope, I mean, I think that role is really more a role for the Libyan people themselves, but I would hope that the international community continues to take an interest in what's happening in Libya, hopefully even after Gaddafi leaves. My concern over the coming weeks and months is how the NTC is doing its job. Are they allowing not only for a open, transparent, inclusive political process, a representative political process, but are they also, on the flip side, allowing for the emergence of a robust civil society which has been repressed over the last not just 40 years, but even before the current regime. Are they going to allow, a truly free press? Are they going to allow labor unions to become strong once again and people to organize? And really, Libyans need to learn how to become citizen activists, watchdogs, critics, monitors. So I just hope that the rest of the world can help the Libyan people in achieving that.
Well, Nejla, you mentioned the NTC, and obviously there's a big question mark as to how organized and unified they are. We have Mohammed Mansour asking on Twitter, now that Tripoli's fallen, is the NTC organized enough to herald in the reforms that the people on the ground are calling for?
Actually, let's get Jason's thoughts on that.
Jason?
Well, this final breakthrough to Tripoli has come at a moment in which the international community is quite organized and the NTC is in disarray. Since the killing of General Abdel Fattah Yunus, a while ago, this culminated in, settling of scores in the established political leadership in Benghazi. However, the key thing is that the United States recognized the Libyan Transitional Council and allowed for their funds to be unfrozen, which means the money is going to be flowing into the coffers as soon as the UN can get some of these things up and running. Mm-hmm. And I put faith that not the NTC, but the Libyan people, these different groups in Tripoli who are going to rise up, new political actors, some who've worked with the old regime, some Berber groups, some university professors, and they're going to work outside the NTC, and they're going to solve these problems.
Let me get Tamer in there, because Tamer, as a representative of the NTC, do you have the infrastructure that you need to credibly govern the nation?
Right now we are even in the last months of the Gaddafi rule or regime. There was a big plan for developing the whole infrastructure of the company, and one of the biggest American companies, I think AECOM, was in the country taking contracts with more than 150 billions to develop the whole infrastructure of the country. There's no actual or real infrastructure in Libya. Everything is destroyed by Gaddafi. So even with the Gaddafi or with the new after the revolution, we are going to restart, actually build the country from scratch. And Mr. Mahmoud Jibril said that we want 480 billion to build Libya.
Okay. Let me ask you one last question, actually, before we take this conversation to our post-show, and that is with this narrative about al-Qaeda-related groups. Some people are saying that Gaddafi was keeping some of these groups under control and that they might be able to have a greater footprint now that he is being removed. How would you respond?
Gaddafi, from the beginning, because of the beginning of the revolution, he started to scare the war from the Libyans, because he made us a known country to the rest of the world. No one knows anything about Libya, even our neighbors, our Arab neighbors. No one knows about Libyan cities, Libyan tribes. No one knows, because of that blackout was a Gaddafi did with the media. So at the beginning of the revolution, he started to say that this is Al-Qaeda, this is terrorists, this is hallucination people, but all the Libyans are Muslims. All the Libyans.
Tamer, we're losing your audio briefly there, but we want you to stay with us. We're going to continue this conversation online. Thank you for being with us. Jason and Nejla, thank you as well. Give us a minute. We're going to continue this for our online community. On Wednesday's show, we look at Cambodia, where a proposed law would restrict civil society groups. And in the United States, 2 American Muslims have made it their mission to visit 30 mosques in 30 days. Tweet your questions and comments to us at #AJStream. Now, join us at stream.aljazeera.com, where we're going to be continuing this conversation about the future of Libya. We'll see you online. Welcome back. This is our post show. We're going to continue this conversation. Libya is a hot topic right now. We want to know a little bit more about what could be in store for that nation moving forward. And let's begin with our guest right here on the couch. So thankful to have you here, Jason and Nejla. Jason, I want to begin with you. Some people have been questioning the human rights record of the NTC, and they've been claiming, obviously, that the general was killed by actual rebel fighters. People have been talking about their actual treatment of journalists. What do you think about how these factors are going to impact the creation of a nation moving forward?
Well, here the word NTC is being used as an imprecise term. There's a distinction between the political leadership and the rebel fighters. The political leadership, some of them were civil servants in the Gaddafi regime, and some of them had blood on their hands from the old regime. Very few. The fighters come in, you know, all shapes and sizes, from people in pickup trucks who've never held a gun before to soldiers who had defected. Yes, we know that there were some revenge killings that have been done by some groups in the Berber Mountains. However, there's no policy emanating from the NTC of human rights abuses or of revenge killings. There's no command and control structures at all. Therefore, to speak of rebel military organization is a misnomer.
But
and there's a lot less revenge killings and a lot less looting than you would expect, because these Libyan groups are ready to throw off Gaddafi, and they're not involved in a civil war of grudge settling.
But let me take this to you, Nejla, because let's say that the overthrow of Gaddafi is complete in the next hours, days, weeks, whatever it may be. What happens then if you have all of these armed groups from different backgrounds with different levels of training, different levels of organization? Is there not the possibility of some kind of armed conflict within the nation?
I mean, I think there's a possibility that anything can happen, and the truth is nobody knows what's going to happen. It's up to the leadership, and there is leadership throughout the country, including in the Western Mountains, including in Tripoli, that I know for a fact have been coordinating with the NTC in those areas. This doesn't mean that the situation will be peaceful necessarily after all is said and done, but I think it's up to that leadership, that nascent leadership, to manage expectations, to manage the security situation, to make sure that, you know, we calm down even the emotional fervor, which they were doing in Benghazi, you know, in the early days of the revolution. Do something about all the weapons that are out there, and manage that security situation first and foremost. And I think, you know, it really depends on the leadership. Unfortunately, they have a heavy responsibility, and for the time being, to be honest, to be frank, there has been a tendency in the interest of unity and in the interest of looking unified in front of the international community for Libyans to at least tacitly throw their support behind the NTC. But this hasn't been without grumblings. There have definitely been several occurrences that are concerning, and several criticisms, and I have criticisms as well. But I think the NTC has a heavy responsibility, and what they do over the coming weeks and months will determine the future of Libya.
I want to draw Tamer back into this, because as Ahmed has got on his screen, you were mentioning leadership of the NTC. You can see on Ahmed's screen, Tamer is actually very closely affiliated with that leadership. And the question that I want to ask him is specifically, Tamer, you've had a group of people basically ramp up their military efforts in a relatively short period of time. How do you plan to demilitarize once Libya has overthrown Gaddafi?
Okay, this question is the main concern to all the people right now. But I asked this question to General Abdel Fattah Yunus before, and he said this is a big issue, but we're going to overcome it. Because the people here in the first few days of the revolution, the calls start for the people to bring back the weapons to the military compounds, and the people respond. So we will have no problem to collect the weapons from the people. I think they will put many solutions, like if you get anything, you get maybe money, or if you get the weapons to the government, or if you bring the weapons to the government or something like this. I don't know actually, but I'm sure that we will get over it.
You know, we have a lot of tweets coming in about the divisions and the NTC. We referenced Iraq earlier, and that devolved into sectarian violence. Now we're talking about tribal violence. And Iron Chariots, his name is Nick Church, tweeted in saying, given tribal divisions in Libya, might a federal system with a weaker central government and more local rule help ease friction? Now, Nick, we know we have you on Google+, so why don't you go ahead and put your question to Nejla?
Yes. It's all well and good for to talk about the need for the NTC to rein in their fighters, but do they actually have a plan to do this?
So actually, forgive me, Taimur, why don't you answer that? Is there a real plan, or is it not a planning stage right now? Did we lose him?
We'll give it one moment. Taimur, can you hear us?
Jason.
Okay, we're going to take a moment. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, that's a great question, and it's all the more pertinent because the 1951 Constitution, when Libya became independent, was a federated system where Cyrenaica as a province and Tripolitania and Fezzan had local governments, and then there was only a loose federal structure. It didn't work. And not only did it not work because there were certain centrifugal forces, but now things have changed. The oil infrastructure crisscrosses the different provinces, and the Great Man-Made River has been the enormous piece of infrastructure that has connected the country. And Libyans don't want to be separated. They want to be united. What I would say is that there being these different groups means that you have to have local power groupings. And that's why I was saying that there's going to be leaderships that's going to arise outside of the formal NTC. Different, areas in Tripoli, they're going to have a local leader, or maybe a tribal leader, and that's not bad because that tribal leader knows his people, quote unquote constituents, and he knows what they need. He knows how to get their electricity running, and he's going to interface with these larger bodies. But we're not going to have a situation where we're going to go back to separate self-governing provinces. It's a recipe for disaster, and it won't happen.
One of the big questions that I think is really important to ask is, in any revolution, it takes a while for there to be a transition to a new form of government. And while there may be a lot of interest, Nejla, in Libyan national unity, how is it going to effectively be achieved? What do you think needs to happen in order to create a unified future?
Right. Well, at this point, the good news is that unity is strong. I mean, despite all the naysaying, everything that we've seen coming out of the country has been positive in terms of the unity of the Libyan people right now. Now, this could unravel if, and this is sort of worst case scenario, in my opinion, again, the leadership throughout the country, whether you're talking about in Benghazi or the emerging leadership in other places, doesn't do a good job of making sure that people feel included, that people feel represented, that resources are distributed fairly, and that it's a transparent, inclusive political process. This, I think, his sort of, I believe, over-exaggerated divide between East and West in Libya historically has arisen over the last 40 years, and perhaps even before then, because of unequal distribution of resources between the eastern west part of the country and the western part of the country. The western part of the country, especially Tripoli, has generally been favored, and the eastern part has been neglected over the past several decades, and this has been one of the reasons. So the regime that's in place now, or that was in place hopefully, has actually contributed to the process of alienating people from each other, and hopefully this revolution, it's tragic because so many people have died over the last 6 months, but if there's a silver lining, this process, these 6 months have actually given the people a sense of unity that maybe they didn't have before, and so maybe hopefully despite all the tragedy, it will be a blessing in disguise that it took this long for things to unfold.
Ahmed?
Well, I was just going to say the idea of things being transitional now is really important, that we recognize that. And Gutmang is tweeting in saying the key word regarding the NTC is transitional. Anything other than a representative democracy won't be accepted. But I guess that, begs the real question then, what is in place on the ground now? Very little is known. Femverve is saying, and if Taimur, you can hear us, she's asking, what legal institutions are in place and are any worth maintaining?
Well, this is an interesting point because Taimur had said previously that the country has largely been destroyed. So I want to actually ask him a little bit more about what was just being presented. Taimur, if you could bring back Gutmang's tweet, I think this is an important one. A lot of people are saying that, transitional is the key word for this national council. How can the Libyan people have confidence that the NTC will literally transition power to others potentially?
Okay, the NTC is the transitional council for the country, but what will be the government in this transitional period is the executive office of the NTC. So Mr. Mahmoud Jibril put a roadmap which will take 8 months.
But Taimur, I just was going to say, that wasn't, the executive council wasn't, it's not representative, it wasn't elected.
Taimur, unfortunately, we're losing him. Last thoughts, Jason, briefly, and then Nejla. Go ahead on this point.
The NTC has said all the right things. They use all the jargon of human rights and civil society organizations and transitioning power. And a lot of them are not only Western educated, but they've dealt with the State Department.
Yeah.
And they're good people.
Yeah.
The question is implementation. The question is implementation.
On that point, Nejla, you get the final word. I mean, do you believe that having fought so hard to get power, they will easily give it up?
Well, actually, there is actually a provision in the NTC now that the people who are a part of the NTC are not allowed to seek or to run for office in the future. So in that sense, if they actually abide by that, then presumably yes, then that's the case. But even Mahmoud Jibril is always quick to emphasize that it's an administrative, not a governmental organization, so we'll see how it goes.
We'll see. Well, I want to thank both of you, Nejla and Jason, for giving your insights into this spirited conversation. We appreciate it. We also appreciate Taimur. We lost him briefly there, but it was good to have him. And Ahmed, thanks so much for bringing our community into this dialogue. Thank you, our community, for joining us on this. Remember, you can keep the conversation going with us online using the hashtag AHAStream. We will absolutely see you online.